Imagine being 8 years old, snatched from your home, with your mother's voice still echoing in your ears, and thrown into a world where your very existence had a price tag. That was the beginning of a story told not by the conquerors, but by the conquered. People like Olaudah Equiano was one of the first Africans to write about his horrors as a slave. One of the first Africans to write his story as a slave back into history. So all the stories that were told by the conquerors. He told from the perspective of the conquered. His story exposes not just what happened to Africans, but what was taken from Africa. Between the 1500s and the 1800s, over 12 million Africans were taken as slaves. They were torn from kingdoms, they were separated from families and shipped across the Atlantic like cargo, like cars. But before they reached the ships, there were raids, there were chains, and there was the market. Africans were sold to Europeans by other Africans. Not out of cruelty, but out of confusion. Because when power shifts and desperation grows, people can be tricked into selling their own mirror. I'm not taking responsibility away from the Africans, right? But you have to understand sometimes that after years of slavery, you begin to lose a sense of who you are. By the time slave trade was in the thick of it, they were probably disillusioned and they were just selling each other off. It's a sad thing to hear. And from his story, the ships were hell. The ships were hell. Olaudah described the stench, he described the screams, he described the bodies. Bodies were packed so tight. I mean, have you eaten canned fish before? And you know how packed it usually is. They packed human beings like that. Human beings. There was barely any room to breathe. And of course, guess what? Thousands of them died before they reached their destinations. Thousands of them were thrown into the sea and they were forgotten. Human beings. Those were futures of people. Those were future inventors. Those were future scientists. They were just tossed into the sea like commodity. Yet those who survived became the foundation of a whole new world. Because guess what? Cotton, sugar, tobacco, industries that made Europe rich were built on the broken backs of Africans. Equiano's story did not end in chains, obviously, because he was able to write it. He bought his freedom and learned to write. So in 1789, he published his autobiography, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano. It was a first-hand account that shook Britain's conscience. Things that they never even thought about. His stories sparked conversations. His stories sparked movements to abolish the slave trade. He showed the world that Africans were not just property. Africans were also people. Africans were thinkers. Africans were scientists. His stories showed all these things. He humanized the faceless. But you see, the transatlantic slave trade, it did more than steal bodies. It fractured souls. It stole memories and made Africans doubt their own greatness. Whether you like it or not, descendants of slaves still carry some of that trauma in them. Trauma of not just loss, but of disconnection. The slave trade ended, but the mindset it created still lingers, and we need to unlearn it. That mindset that Africa is less, that mindset that Africa is subservient, that mindset that Africa is not good enough, it needs 2, be abolished, just like the slave trade itself. The slave trade wasn't just about labor, it was an identity theft. And it is up to you and I to find that identity back, find who we are, and build from there. Until next time.